This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that you can use to easily create and manage a website for your business.
Making a film is something that involves a lot of technicalities, and it is hard work. And it is something that's systematic for me that I've learned. Going up against time and money, you never have enough of either one when we're making a film. And I hear that it's still like that on films of higher budgets.
Ryan Coogler's career has seen a progression all the way from shooting a low-budget indie movie that became a festival smash, to directing one of the biggest blockbuster Marvel films in the world. As you may have seen in this series, directing films at different budget levels has an inevitable impact on how movies are made. Despite this, Coogler's work is all bound by characters and stories told through an empathetic lens, made by a close-knit team of collaborators, which are thoroughly researched and to a large extent shaped by how he writes his screenplays. So let's take a look at the low-budget Fruitvale Station, the mid-budget Creed, and the high-budget Black Panther to see how his approach to making movies has evolved over time and identify some commonalities that are present throughout his career.
The biggest thing that I walked away with from film school was just a lot of my colleagues. Like I met the composer that's done all of my films at film school. One of my editors who's worked with me the whole time. The community was the most valuable thing that it gave.
Coogler first became interested in screenwriting during a college creative writing course, where his teacher recognized his talent for his visual writing style and proposed he try writing screenplays. After undergrad, he got into film school at USC, where he made a number of short films that did well at festivals, with some collaborators who he would continue to work with throughout his career. During his studies, he mentioned to a friend who was studying law about potentially making a film about the Oscar Grant case. Later, when his friend began working on the case, he introduced Coogler to the Grant family, who gave the rights to tell the story. After the festival success of his shorts, and getting the script for Fruitvale Station into the Sundance Screenwriters Lab in 2012, Forrest Whitaker came on board to produce through his production company Significant Productions. A production budget of $900,000 was secured to make the film.
Being in the Bay Area at the time and being the same age as the guys that were involved and seeing a lot of myself and a lot of my friends in them, and shortly after seeing it become politicized, seeing his humanity get split in two different directions, and the fact that he was a human being whose life was lost kind of get glossed over. My artistic outlet is filmmaking. So oftentimes when I see things or when I think about things, I think of them in that format.
He compiled as much research as he could from a combination of legal documents, as well as talking to the friends and family of Oscar Grant. His goal was to treat the story with a sensitivity by humanizing the characters on screen through portraying an intimate, personal portrait of their relationships, letting the story play out in a world which was as true to life as he could make it. To create this visual world encompassed in realism, he turned to a close collaborator, cinematographer Rachel Morrison.
Fruitvale's it's a really interesting scenario for a cinematographer because you have tons of films that are based on true stories, but very few that are based on true stories that happened 3 years ago in locations that still exist exactly as they were. So it's not this interpretation of something. It was really important to be very, very authentic.
She pushed this idea of authenticity visually by shooting on a grainier, more organic Super 16mm film, using a handheld exploratory single camera, and by keeping the lighting as naturalistic, motivated, and as true to life as possible. The smaller gauge film size meant that they shot on wider lenses and therefore had a deeper depth of field than a 35mm film plane. Morrison shot the film on an Arriflex 416 with Zeiss Ultra 16 lenses, which were donated to the production by Arri. The Ultra 16s are probably the sharpest Super 16 primes on the market, and since there were going to be a lot of low light scenes, Morrison wanted lenses that would be as sharp as possible when shot wide open at t1.3 on the lower fidelity 16mm Kodak 500 tungsten film. An idea that the cinematographer discussed with Coogler was finding a middle ground between a deconstructed documentary realism and a fictional elevated cinematic gravitas where visual tweaks were made to elevate the story. An example of this was how they used the color grade in post-production as a low-budget way of changing the color balance of the lights in the real shooting location.
In the BART station, the fluorescent lights up above are actually, they're warm white, which is sort of a yellow, warm feeling to them. And it's this, terrible, terrible event. And for me, I always, the second I saw them, I'm like, well, we're going to time it cool, right? And then we got into this dialogue about, will it still feel like the BART station if we time it to feel a little cooler instead of being warm? That was the dialogue, which is so interesting. Most films, I think, are much less sort of, beat for beat, authentic interpretations of things.
By shooting with no large production design builds, being quick, flexible, handheld, and using a lot of ambient light that was naturally present on the real locations, Coogler pulled off the shoot with his tight-knit crew on a budget of $900,000. Before we move on to talking about his next film and its step up in budget, I'd like to thank Squarespace, who are the sponsor of this video. If you're involved in the film industry as a filmmaker, crew member, are starting your own business, or need a space to display your work online, then it goes without saying that you'll need a website to create an online presence. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that you can use to design a stylish and practical website for any person or business, using their drag-and-drop templates. This means that you don't need advanced web design skills to get your site off the ground. Squarespace makes it easy for clients or collaborators to browse your creative portfolio, such as any film work you may have done, by using their photo and video libraries, and then allows them to connect with you through your contact page. So to set up your website, be sure to head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/indepthcine to save 10% of your first purchase of a website or domain.
Well, I'm a big Rocky fan. I kind of inherited my love for those movies through my love for my father. So I knew the movies really well. I knew the world really well. Kind of came up with this idea where a young guy interacts with basically my dad's hero at a time in his life where he's aging and dealing with his own mortality in a way that we've never seen him deal with it before. It was really kind of about me and my dad. As much as I could bring in my own, personal experience, really with my dad, my relationship with him has a heartbeat for creative tendencies there.
Contrary to what some may think, the idea for Creed was not one that was conceived by a studio. Instead, Coogler had been toying with the concept for a Rocky spin-off with his USC friend Aaron Covington just as a fun spec script while he was working on Fruitvale Station. At the Sundance Screenwriting Lab for his first film, he was able to secure an agent who asked him whether he had any ideas for projects beyond Fruitvale. After explaining his concept for Creed, his agent set up a meeting where Coogler pitched the idea to Stallone, the original writer and of course the lead actor in the Rocky franchise. After securing Stallone's buy-in to get a script written, MGM paid for him and Covington to write the screenplay. Appreciating the fresh perspective on the story and his character, Stallone gradually agreed to come on board until MGM greenlit the project with a production budget of approximately $35 million. In Stallone, Coogler found a new collaborator to work with.
He's also a producer on the film. He was comfortable taking in a backseat, which is a big thing. He had written all of the scripts, every single last one for these types of films. What really made him excited was seeing this from the millennial perspective. Talk about a 68-year-old dude who's showing up in a call, every day and shows up for a day where we shooting 4 pages. And he's got 10 pages of character work that he did the night before. It was amazing and it was energizing.
One example of Coogler's openness to collaborations from his cast and crew happened when, instead of Stallone throwing water in Michael B. Jordan's face to wake him up as it was written in the screenplay, Stallone proposed that his character play old records instead, as it's what he felt his character would do. They went with a suggestion and it made the cut. To create a visual language for the film which was a little bit slicker than Fruitvale Station, but which was still grounded by a similar photographic feeling of realism, he turned to cinematographer Maurice Alberti, whose naturalistic work on The Wrestler he admired. Rather than something more stylized like Raging Bull, they decided on a camera language which was more realistic, and which at the same time paid subtle homage to the original Rocky film, with its famous early use of the Steadicam, but didn't copy the look.
We look back more to what not to do. Do you like this color? Do you like this? No. Well, me neither. And taking the good thing, like the iconic thing of the steps and, and things like that. But yeah, he was reinventing.
One way that they reinvented the film visually was by making the final boxing match look more like it would be presented realistically on a modern TV broadcast, by shooting at a deeper stop of T5.6 and using a higher key lighting style. They did this by building the ring on a soundstage and surrounding it with a 600-foot green screen wall, which they could then replace with a composited crowd using visual effects. Her team lit the ring by rigging up square truss above the space, from which they suspended 120 tungsten parcan lights with different lights focused at different distances to provide an even overhead lighting. Because it's tiring for actors to repeat these choreographed boxing scenes many times in a row and maintain the same level of energy, they shot with multiple cameras to get better coverage, in a slightly similar visual style to how big fights might be shot for TV. This scene was covered with one camera on a techno crane getting telescoping movement and wider shots, one camera on a Steadicam which could roam around the ring, and two handheld cameras getting on-the-ground reactions. They made the decision to shoot digitally on the Arri Alexa XT and 2.8K Arri RAW with spherical Cooke S4 primes and some wide-angle Angenieux Optimo zooms. She also used the Alexa Mini on a Movi for some scenes which needed nimble camera moves through tight spaces, such as when the camera tracked from outside the ring, through the ropes, into the ring, which they did by passing the Movi off in the hand to a new operator. Alberti chose the S4s as they flattered skin tones and rendered them nice and softly, which counteracted the digital grain they planned to add in post, which roughened up skin a little bit. Creed was therefore pulled off on a much larger production budget of around $35 million that leaned on established franchise characters, while also invigorating the series with a new perspective that used a larger crew to run more gear, involved building sets, shooting more time-consuming action sequences, and incorporating more visual effects work in post.
The biggest difference actually wasn't in the restrictions. It was actually in the lack of restrictions. Like I was making my first film, dealing with not a lot of money, you got a lot of limitations. And it helps you actually move faster because you can't do just anything. You know what I mean? It's only maybe sometimes one place you can put the camera. You can only be in this location for 2 hours and then you gotta go. It makes it easier, like when you can do anything. And that's kind of what happens with a film like this. That's what I found made it a lot harder.
A lack of limitations means that more preparation time can be put into the project during pre-production. As with all his movies, Coogler's role as a director began with him being involved in writing the script. An extensive period of prep time was necessary for this Marvel blockbuster undertaking, which involved far more scope, intricate scenes, and visual effects than any of his prior work had. This required input from multiple heads of departments. For this, he brought together many of his prior collaborators who'd worked with him since Fruitvale Station, and some even since his student short film days. This included editor Michael P. Shorver, production designer Hannah Beachler, composer Ludwig Göransson, and cinematographer Rachel Morrison. The director and cinematographer had many discussions with Marvel's VP of Physical Production and with Jeffrey Bauman, who oversaw a team of 16 different visual effects vendors who were working on the film. Practically, this prep work involved doing things like creating a previs, a rough animated version of the entire cut of the film, and mapping out how they would cover a scene using a 3D printed scale model of a set for a casino scene they would be constructing. One of the moves that they came up with for this fight scene was a shot where the camera transitioned between different characters on the set's 2 floors by flying through the air. They rigged a Movi gimbal onto a cable rig, which lifted the camera to the second floor. From there, another operator could grab the camera off the line and begin operating it. While they were working on building the set, Morrison drew up a detailed lighting plan, which involved rigging multiple overhead 8x8 and 4x4 blanket lights from Souce Maker, using higher output LRX Scorpion tungsten units to backlight, and then using Vari-Light VL1000s, which could be remotely swiveled to hit specific spots with targeted light. All of these fixtures were effectively built into the set and rigged to a DMX board so that the levels could be adjusted quickly on the day of shooting. Coogler turned his attention to detail for each character by focusing on things such as their costumes, which in the casino scene were designed to take on the Pan-African flag colors of green, red, and black. Since seeing all the costumes, even in the backgrounds of shots, was a priority to the director, Morrison needed to shoot at a deeper stop. This meant that rather than shooting on a large format Alexa 65 camera, Morrison chose to shoot open gate on a smaller sensor Alexa XT, which would yield a slightly deeper focus than a large format camera, with the Panavision Primo spherical lenses set to a stop between T2.8 and T4. Coogler shot Black Panther with its larger scope story that involved more actors, preparation, visual effects, action sequences, stunts, bigger set builds, and even larger technical camera, lighting, and grip setups. However, he maintained his fingerprints on the project by co-writing the screenplay, using real-world research to provide a level of depth to each character, working with the same close-knit pool of collaborators, creating a deliberate visual style which was true to the tone he wanted, and carefully telling the story through a lens which is empathetic and does justice to his characters. Thanks to everyone for watching, and a special thanks to all the supporters of the channel on Patreon that make this possible. Let me know down in the comments what other directors you'd like to see featured in this series. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.